Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I spent several years as an enlisted Navy service member stationed in Yokosuka, Japan, before getting transferred back to the States. During my time there, I worked at the main hospital that cared for military personnel and their families. It was a small hospital where everyone knew everyone. Shortly after I left Japan, my former colleagues told me about a new physician officer who had joined the radiology department. They complained he was horrible to work with, but that wasn't unusual. What was unusual was what happened next. One day, someone found a letter this officer had left on his desk. They took a picture and sent it to me. The letter was a formal request to be moved from enlisted housing to officer housing, and what he wrote was downright offensive. For context, military housing overseas consists of apartment complexes called towers. In Yokosuka, there are 9 towers, with 2 designated for officers. Since enlisted personnel vastly outnumber officers, housing assignments depend on availability. If you don't apply for housing on time, you get placed wherever there's space. This new officer had been assigned to an enlisted tower, which happens occasionally without issue, but the contents of his letter were shocking. I asked my friend if they had seen what the officer wrote in his housing request. My friend replied that they knew about it and couldn't believe it. They offered to send me a picture. His letter said things like, "I have many valid objections to living in a building of almost all enlisted and even many lower enlisted being an officer. There is a lot of crime, violent actions, drug use, and alcoholism that happen in enlisted housing. There are also sexual assaults and other perverts. I have a good-looking family, a wife and 2 daughters aged 3 and 4. They are prime targets to be victims for these enlisted deviant activities. Officers are much more respectable, and these types of deviant activities are incredibly rare compared to the deviant activities of enlisted being commonplace. My children need to make friends with other officer children. My wife needs to make friends with other officers' wives. I need to make friends with other officers. Forcing an officer to live in a large apartment building with almost all enlisted is unethical." This guy had previously been an enlisted army member before becoming an officer. In civilian terms, this would be like a manager calling all his subordinates criminals, perverts, alcoholics, and drug users, despite many having families of their own. And not only could this officer make their work lives miserable, but he could also negatively impact their careers. Everyone was furious. Since I was separating from the military soon, I decided I had nothing to lose. I created a fake Facebook account and posted his letter along with his picture on a popular military group page. Within days, it spread everywhere, but I wasn't done. The military has something called challenge coins, like collectible trading cards, but in coin form. I designed one with this officer's face on one side and a middle finger on the reverse. I also created stickers showcasing how proud we deviants were. My friends said the coins were amazing and asked if they could buy a bunch to distribute there. I told them they could, and I would give them a discount so they could sell them and make a profit. I sold over 70 coins to my friend at a discounted rate so she could sell them for profit. I also sold them stateside and even shipped some to Europe, making about $3,000 overall. Since the coins only had his face without his name, I couldn't officially be accused of targeting him specifically. But soon, no matter where this officer went, he would see his face displayed on someone's desk. The story exploded. It was featured in an online naval newspaper and on 2 popular YouTube channels. When military leadership got involved, the officer was sent to captain's mast, essentially Navy court. He tried claiming his wife wrote the letter, but no one believed him because her writing style was even worse. She attempted to take the blame, but it didn't work. They both ended up deleting all their social media accounts, and he received 3 Uniform Code of Military Justice articles. In the military, you have deadlines for advancing in rank, and if you don't get promoted within a certain time frame, you're discharged. Because of these charges, he wouldn't be eligible for promotion and was involuntarily separated from service. The officer program had paid for his PhD, requiring him to serve 10 years in return. Since he didn't complete his service obligation, he now had to repay the military for his education costs. In the end, he lost his job, had to repay his educational expenses, and faced social isolation because no one wanted to work with him while the paperwork for his stateside transfer was processing. My friend asked if I had heard the latest news about that officer. I told him I hadn't, and asked what happened. My friend explained that he was being discharged and had to pay back all the money for his PhD. They added that no one would even talk to him there anymore. I said that's what happens when you call all your colleagues deviants and criminals. It turns out us enlisted deviants knew a thing or two about proper respect after all. I grew up in a small part of the Midwest where my parents moved around frequently. By my sophomore year of high school, we had relocated to the largest town in our area. I went from being in a freshman class of just 25 students to a class of 300. The culture shock was overwhelming. None of my previous schools had drama clubs or theater classes, so I had zero frame of reference for anything related to theater or performing arts. Little did I know how important this would become. My English teacher was obsessed with drama. Theater was her entire life. She worked with local colleges to produce plays, directed yearly performances at the high school, and ran community theater involving all the local students. She had clear favorites and wasn't shy about who she liked or disliked. She would manipulate class schedules to ensure her favorite drama kids got into her English class because she considered herself integral to their development. The whole drama club seemed cultish to me. Sometimes she would even publicly humiliate students who had made mistakes during performances. She was a bully who played favorites shamelessly. I did well in her English class and was actually bored with the curriculum. Around mid-year, she pulled me aside for what seemed like a special opportunity. The drama teacher told me I should have been placed in a tougher class. She explained there were no spots in the high track class right now, but offered to seat me in front of her desk and teach me extra material on the side. She promised to make sure I got into high track for my junior year. I was excited to be singled out in such a huge class and thrilled at the possibility of advanced placement the following year. English had always been my favorite subject, but the extra work turned out to be bogus. She handed me a boring book called The Scarlet Pimpernel and told me to write a report, with no extra credit. I quickly abandoned the additional work and pretended I'd never agreed to it. She stopped mentioning it but kept me front and center at her desk. That's when I realized what was really happening. Next to me sat her absolute favorite student, the star of the drama club. Let's call him the Golden Boy. She had been coaching Golden Boy since middle school and would constantly tell us he would win an Oscar someday. They had a bizarre routine. The drama teacher would tell him that one day he'd be accepting an Oscar, and everyone would know who taught him everything. Golden Boy would respond by promising to thank her in his acceptance speech. They shared inside jokes during class and had this weird mutual admiration society going. It was uncomfortable to witness. After Christmas break, we were taking our first big semester test when it happened. Golden Boy asked me what the answer to question 8 was. He wasn't whispering, but he wasn't speaking at full volume either. We were sitting directly in front of the teacher's desk. I could have touched it with my foot. I looked at Golden Boy, then at the drama teacher, waiting for her reaction. But she acted like she hadn't heard anything. None of the nearby students said anything either. It was surreal. I knew if I got caught cheating, my mother would be furious. But did it count as cheating if the teacher was allowing it? So I just thought, whatever, and gave him the answer. I waited for her to send us to the office or something, but she just sat there looking pleased. As the semester continued, Golden Boy kept asking for more and more test answers. That's when I realized what had happened. She had placed me, the good student, next to her future Oscar winner, specifically so I could help him cheat. She was using me because I was the new kid. As the semester progressed, I studied harder and decided to go with the flow. But I was angry, so I formulated a plan. I started whispering answers to Golden Boy before he even had to ask, and would angle my paper so he could see it better. All semester long, I made his cheating experience smooth as silk. The drama teacher seemed thrilled that I had figured out what she wanted. Then came finals time. Our school followed a university model, with finals heavily weighted toward our overall grade. For the final exam, I gave him completely wrong answers. Absurdly, obviously incorrect answers. All while the teacher sat right in front of us. Golden Boy must have long ago stopped engaging with the class material because he wrote down everything I said without question. The drama teacher must have been screaming inside as she listened to me, feeding him wrong answers, but she never flinched or raised her eyes. She never indicated she knew what was happening. It was the most fun I'd ever had taking a test. When the bell rang, she looked directly at me, and I just smiled right back at her. I smiled sweetly at her and thanked her for a wonderful semester. I've always wondered what she did about his test. There's no way she flunked her Golden Boy, despite how badly he must have failed. She got her revenge, though. I was never allowed into AP English or high track English for the rest of my high school career. I was angry about it, but it was worth it. Golden Boy ended up going to New York to pursue acting. He got a few minor roles, but ultimately went nowhere in the industry. There was someone else in that class who actually did make it big in Hollywood. It wasn't Golden Boy, and it wasn't me. Just a quiet kid who sat in the back of the class. I don't think I ever spoke to them during our time in school. They were introverted and not someone you'd expect to succeed in Hollywood. Now when I see this person receiving accolades, I raise a toast to Golden Boy, future Oscar winner, and the drama teacher who almost coached someone who made it. That must really burn her up. The drama teacher would often say that one day, everyone would know she trained an Oscar winner. I would think to myself that it just wouldn't be the one she thought. I'm a 26-year-old physician assistant student, and I've had my share of I don't work here moments. Two incidents from the past year still make me laugh. The first situation happened during my pediatrics rotation last year. Our office team decided to treat ourselves to sushi at a small local spot for a late lunch around 2 p.m. It was just the three of us. My classmate in teal scrubs, our medical assistant in hot pink scrubs, and me in black scrubs with my stethoscope tucked into my front pocket. The restaurant was empty since the lunch rush had passed. The servers were all in their mid-20s wearing the store uniform, white undershirts, black t-shirts, and black pants or jeans. We were seated in the first booth right by the entrance. As we were finishing our meal, two guys who looked to be in their mid-20s came in and sat in the booth next to ours, passing by us on their way in. We didn't pay them much attention as we continued chatting about our morning patients. When we were ready to leave, I got up to wash my hands before heading back to the clinic. As I walked past their booth, one of the guys stopped me. The first guy asked me to check on the edamame he had ordered a while ago, wondering if it was still coming out. I initially thought he was talking to a server behind me, so I looked around. There were no servers in sight. That's when I realized he was talking to me. I stopped, turned to them with a smile, and told him that I didn't work there. I watched as the guy looked at my face, then down at my scrubs, then noticed my stethoscope. His expression shifted from confusion to embarrassment, his ears turning bright red. I continued walking toward the bathroom, but I could hear his friend laughing at him. The second guy told his friend that I was a medical professional, not a server. The first guy replied that he didn't know. After washing my hands, I walked back past their booth. They stopped me again, this time to apologize. I told them it was no big deal and that I hoped they'd get their edamame soon. When I rejoined my team and told them what happened, we all laughed about it. The second incident happened just a few weeks ago. I was on a time crunch with only 2 hours to find farewell gifts for some colleagues. I was dressed in a black crop top, black leggings, and my favorite Avengers-themed Crocs. I ended up at a bookstore about an hour before closing, looking for the perfect book for a colleague who loves reading. I hadn't been to this bookstore in years, so I was completely lost. After searching through the shelves for what felt like forever, I finally found a suitable book. I called my boyfriend to let him know I was on my way home soon and that I was heading to the register to check out before the store closed. While still on the phone and speed walking toward the registers, I heard someone saying, "Excuse me." I ignored it at first, assuming they were talking to someone else, but then I realized there was nobody else around. Not wanting to be rude, I turned around. A man in his mid-30s was looking at me. The man expressed his frustration about looking for something I couldn't quite hear, complaining that the staff kept moving things around, so he couldn't find what he was looking for. I looked at him, then at my phone where my boyfriend was still on the line, then down at my outfit, then back at the man. I told him that I didn't work there. Instead of apologizing, he asked if I could help him find it anyway. I was taken aback by his entitlement. There was no way I was going to help someone who couldn't even apologize for their mistake. I declined, saying that I had gotten lost in the store myself, and then said goodbye. His face showed confusion and offense as I turned and continued my journey to the checkout. My boyfriend asked what that interaction was about. I explained that it was just another person thinking I worked everywhere I go, joking that it must be because of my helpful face. I've learned two things from these experiences. First, people really don't pay attention to what retail uniforms actually look like. Second, some people feel entitled to help regardless of whether you work somewhere or not. At least these incidents make for funny stories to share with friends. I'm sure it won't be the last time someone mistakes me for an employee, but next time I'll be ready with an even better comeback. I'm in my mid-40s with a teenage daughter who's passionate about theater and music. For the past few months, I've been juggling work, household responsibilities, and supporting my daughter through countless rehearsals for her high school musical. I've attended every practice, arranged transportation, and even volunteered for the Musical Boosters group, working shifts during intermissions and pre-shows. My husband and our two sons have been notably absent throughout this entire process. Despite my daughter's dedication and hard work, I only asked them to attend one performance out of the 4 total showings, once for parent night and 3 regular performances over the weekend. It seemed like a reasonable request to show support for her accomplishment. They agreed to come to the afternoon showing on the weekend. I was relieved that my daughter would finally have her entire family present to support her. The first act went well, but during intermission, my husband said he wasn't feeling well and thought we should head home. When I asked what was wrong and if he was okay, he said he was just tired and hungry and didn't think he could sit through the rest of it. I pleaded with him, mentioning that the second act was only about 35 minutes long and asked if he could stay just a bit longer. I told him our daughter would be devastated if he left now. He said he really didn't feel good and thought we should go. I pointed out that everyone else's family was staying the whole time, and they would be giving hugs and flowers at the end. I told him that if he left, it would just be me there for her again, and asked him to stay. Despite my pleas, he decided to leave anyway and took our sons with him. I was upset. After all the work my daughter had put in, all the hours of practice, all she wanted was for her family to be there for one complete performance. When she came out after the show and saw only me waiting, she looked disappointed. Later that night, we had an argument. I told him that what he did was selfish and asked if he couldn't sit through another 35 minutes for his own daughter. He said he wasn't feeling well. I asked if he felt well enough to drive home and make dinner when he got there. I said he just didn't want to be bothered. He said I was overreacting and claimed she didn't even notice they left. I told him she noticed and had asked me where they all went as soon as she came out. The argument ended with neither of us backing down, and the tension lingered throughout the week. Fast forward to this weekend, when my husband asked if I wanted to go see the musical at his school that weekend, suggesting we could all go as a family. He couldn't sit through the last 35 minutes of his own daughter's performance, but now he wanted us to sit through an entire musical for students we didn't even know. I refused, explaining that I didn't want to sit through someone else's whole musical when he couldn't be bothered to sit through his own daughter's performance. He said I was being hateful and claimed it wasn't the same thing. I asked how it wasn't the same thing, pointing out that he was asking me to do exactly what he refused to do for his daughter. He then turned to our daughter, ignoring me, and asked if she wanted to go with him, offering to take her. He added it would have to be the Sunday matinee because he didn't want to drive at night. My daughter reminded him that she had voice lessons on Sunday and couldn't miss them. He decided he would take her grandmother Instead, he turned back to me and said I was being unreasonable, insisting this had nothing to do with what happened at her musical. I disagreed, saying this had everything to do with that incident. I told him he wasn't being a supportive father and couldn't even see the double standard he was creating. He claimed he was supportive and pointed out that he had attended part of her show. I said he had only attended part of one show out of 4 and couldn't even stay until the end. I asked why he now wanted us to sit through an entire performance for students we don't even know. This argument was just the latest in a pattern that had been escalating over the past few years. His lack of support for our daughter's activities while expecting us to support his interests had become a recurring issue. I started to realize this wasn't just about a musical, it was about respect, consideration, and being present for the people you claim to love. For years, I've been trying to get us into family therapy without success. My husband refuses to acknowledge there's a problem, always claiming I'm overreacting or being too sensitive. But seeing the hurt in my daughter's eyes when her father and brothers weren't there for her curtain call made me realize that something needed to change. The musical incident was just a tipping point that made me finally stop and think about what I want for my future and my children's future. Sometimes the most entitled people are the ones closest to us, the ones who expect unconditional support while offering none in return. As I sat there watching my husband make plans to attend someone else's musical after walking out on his daughter's performance, I made a promise to myself and my children. We deserve better, and it's time we started demanding it. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.